Okay, so today we got a 2016 Suburban here with a 6L80 automatic transmission. Customer complains that at 65 miles an hour, the RPM is constantly going up and down. I did a test drive, and sure enough, it has torque converter clutch slip and also torque converter clutch shudder. It's only got about 110,000 miles on it, and I dropped the pan to examine the condition of the fluid, drained it into this clean container. As you can see, it's very dirty, dark. This is the filter that came out of it. The filter media is very dark compared to, this is one I just changed on one with 100,000 miles, so only like 10,000 less miles. And if you look at the color on the left, you see it's like a tan, and then on the right, it's much darker. And the pan is full of metal particulate, so the filter, the suction window sits right there, so all the metal will collect around there. I have seen worse than this. I mean, obviously this is a lot of metal. There's the magnet. So it's got quite a bit of metal in this thing. And I'm assuming most of that metal, or probably all of the metal, is from the torque converter, because these things give lots of torque converter problems, and it does have the shudder and it's slipping, so that's likely the torque converter coming apart. And so the obvious proper solution is to replace the transmission at this point, or rebuild it. But the customer does not have the money right now, so we're going to try to tune it and see if that's going to fix it. I'm also, of course, going to put fresh fluid, fresh filter, and some additive in there. Hopefully, when I change the fluid, it still has the problem. I'm sure it will, so I can capture that on video to do a before and after. And we will also monitor during the test drive the torque converter clutch slip with HP tuner, so you can see it shuddering and see just how much slip this thing has when the torque converter is calling for lockup. Here's a little tip when you're doing this job. The manual wants you to drop that Y pipe because it's in the way of the transmission pan. All you need is a big pry bar, ratchet strap it to the frame. If you're by yourself like I am today, now you have plenty of clearance to easily take the pan in and out. Now I will say, if you're planning on rebuilding your transmission yourself or having a shop rebuild it, you probably don't want to go the tune route, because the metal floating around in the transmission fluid could potentially destroy the valve body or planetary gears or who knows what. For us, we just buy remanufactured transmission from GM. They're very reasonably priced with the whole unit. So if this one completely grenades, it doesn't matter. And the GM transmissions come with a 3-year, 100,000 mile warranty. The cool thing about them is if the customer, the transmission goes out, they can just take it to any GM dealer in the country and they will warranty it for free. Labor, parts, so it's a really good deal. This is the additive I'm going to be using. This Lube Guard 60902 and the 19680. This is what I always do when I have one that's got torque converter shudder and there's no metal in the oil. It's just shuddering. We'll put this in there with a fresh filter and fluid, and most of the time this will repair it. Only in extreme situations like this one do we have to go the HP tuner route. So if you've never used HP tuners before, it's not too hard. Got the MPVI2 interface hooked up to the OBD2 port, then to my laptop USB. Come down here to the search feature, type in VCM, it's going to bring up VCM scanner. So this is the default display for HP tuners. We're going to change this up so we can just monitor the torque converter clutch. So what we want to do here is go ahead and remove the gauges. We don't need those. We don't need this chart. Then we're going to right click on any part of the screen here. So you can go to chart layout. Man, my phone's not working very good for this. I'm going to go ahead and delete these lower groups. So just click on the group. Over here we're going to remove group. Remove group 4 and group 5. That leaves us 2 groups left. Over here, this is all the PIDs that we can get. These are the default PIDs. And we're going to right click, remove all channels. Then we're going to add the channels that we want to monitor. So the PIDs. We want RPM. So here we go, engine RPM. Then we want everything torque converter clutch related. So TCC for torque converter clutch. Going to click on the slip, desired slip, and the line pressure. That's going to add the channels over here. You have to have the channels added here for the data to be displayed here. Even though it says, like right here, it says injector duty cycle percentage. If I don't have the injector duty cycle percentage selected over here, even though it's got the PID on the graph, it's not going to show anything. It has to be under the monitored channels section. Then we're going to go back to graph. We have to modify the layout of this chart to display what we want. So group 1, we'll keep that RPM. Speed, we're going to select what we want to, what am I doing? Sorry, I don't use HP tuners very often. So you're going to highlight speed. We don't want speed. It's going to be remove series, remove injector duty cycle, remove everything in group 2. We're not concerned with any of those PIDs. Remove, remove, remove. Going to go back to group 1. We're going to add in the PIDs that we want. So they're calling it a series. So add series. I believe you just click here for the parameter. And we're going back to the same search feature that we used for the channels. So we're going to type in the same stuff. So torque converter clutch, slip. Now we want the angular frequency. That's RPM, not ratio. And torque converter clutch slip, we need to set our limits. Now the limits, if you look over here on the graph, so right here we have 0 RPM and 6,000 RPM. That's for the red PID, which is RPM. So we're going to set our scaling factor of our chart. If we had to set, say, 6,000 to 8,000, you would never see any display for RPM because it's all out of range, you know what I'm saying? So torque converter clutch slip generally never goes above 300. So we're going to set our max limit to 300 to scale that chart. And you can choose the color as white. Obviously we want different colors for the different PIDs. So as long as they're not the same, we're good. So we'll leave that as white. And that's pretty much it. And then we're going to label this. We need to label it or else it's going to just be called new series. So label that torque converter clutch slip. Torque converter clutch slip. Now if you make your labels too long, it'll run off the chart here. So I don't know how to fix that. I'm sure there's a way to fix that. So there's that. And then we're going to add in another series parameter. It's going to be torque converter clutch desired slip. Again, well, this one only has angular frequency, which is what we want. We want the limits to be the same exact limits as for the torque converter clutch slip. That way the line graph is on the same scale. It's much easier to understand what's going on because they should, in a perfect world, completely mirror each other. The color, we don't want it white because then it would match the other one, so we'll make this green. Don't forget to label it torque converter clutch. We're going to put DES for desired slip. Let's see if it'll fit the whole thing. There we go, that's good enough for me. Group 2. Now we can keep adding series. I forgot how many PIDs you can add to one group, but you can put quite a few here. I just, to keep it cleaner, I'm going to go ahead and add the last PID down to the lower graph here, and that's torque converter clutch line pressure. So again, add series. Torque converter clutch line pressure. Change the color to a color that's not used. Well, that doesn't really matter because it's on a complete separate graph, but we'll make it a light blue. It's in PSI. I'm going to say, 250 should be, it should never have more than that going to it. but just in case, we'll make it 275. Look, I'm no transmission guy, so it is what it is. Okay, so label that torque converter clutch line pressure. That's it. Now we should be able to exit out of this. Now we can go ahead and do our test drive. As you can see, the red scale there is for RPM, as it's red. Torque converter clutch slip is in white. 0 to 300, and then 0 to 300 on our green, which is desired slip. They should mirror each other. And then line pressure down there on the bottom. You can hide this if you want to, or you can monitor the PIDs right here. It will be in digital format. And when we want to start the test drive, turn key on, connect to the vehicle. And start scanning. Now, the really cool thing about HP tuners is the data is absolutely instant. It is like almost lab scope fast. Unlike a normal scanner, even the Snap-on scanners are known for being, I mean, they're not known, they are the fastest graphing scanner I've ever used, and what most people have claimed. But they're nothing, absolutely nothing compared to HP tuners. I'm going to try to... It's absolutely instant. So if you're trying to graph out torque converter clutch slip on the Snap-on and it's doing shudder, you're never going to see it. I mean, you might if it's really bad, but generally it doesn't update fast enough. But this, you will absolutely see the shudder. So now it's time for a test drive. Now, the cool thing about HP tuners, you can take as long of a log as you want to. You can drive for a week as long as your computer can hold the information. There's been several people who have done several hour-long drives and logged the whole thing. So don't worry about running out of room here. And once you're done, all you have to do is go up to the blue square, click Stop Scanning, and it's going to save everything. And you can click anywhere on here, and wherever that little line is that you put, it's going to give you all the readouts there. So that's really nice. And you can also scroll back. This is only about a 30-second capture, but if you had a longer capture, say a 4-hour capture, it's got a scroll bar here, and you can scroll back and view all your data from start to finish. Now, one thing I'm going to do on the test drive before I even tune it, just to make sure, because I don't want to waste tuner credits and my time trying to tune this thing if it will not hold lockup, is if you click this green button here, it's called Vehicle Controls and Special Functions. It allows you to do output controls, and when you command something, it happens. It's not like a Snap-on scanner where if you command a starter relay and the engine's already running, it's not going to let you engage a starter relay, because then you'll just be grinding the starter and could mess something up. If you click on something here, it's going to happen. So make sure, don't click on anything unless you absolutely know it's going to be safe for it to do. So if you were to go over here to the transmission, torque converter clutch, and lock this thing, it's going to lock. So if you got this thing in drive and you're sitting here, it's gonna probably kill the motor or take off on you, one or the other. But what it enables me to do is, while I'm driving down the road, is I can just go over here and lock this thing fully and make sure it holds 0 RPM worth of lock. If it's still slipping when I got this on, then there's likely no way that my tune's going to help this thing. And it might, because my tune, I'm increasing the line pressure that it's going to be sending to the torque converter clutch. I don't know what type of pressure it sends to it with HP tuners, if it sends more than normal or what, but I haven't had one yet that I have clicked the on button and it did not hold. And these have been transmissions in worse shape than the one I just showed you with the metal in the pan. They had even more metal and they were still able to hold lock. with just clicking this on button without even doing the tune. So I want to make sure that it will work before I even tune this thing. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and slowly start accelerating. Now these things use torque converter clutch lockup in 2nd gear all the way through 6th. And hopefully you'll see. Oh, see that? It just went up and down a little bit there. I'm barely on the throttle. Oh, I just shuddered right there. Try to get the speed in there so you know how fast I'm going here. Here we go, this will work better. Wide lens. Now, customer mainly complained at 65, but it does it at other speeds as well. Okay, right there. It's not much right there, but about 50 RPM on the tack or so. Okay, so here's the data log. I did change the RPM from 6,000 to 2,750 as I realized that I'm not going to be going over 3,000 RPM in this test, or even 2,700 RPM. So it's easier to see what's going on here. So this is when it was pretty cold leaving the shop, and so we have a torque converter clutch desired slip at that line. It's going to be 20 RPM. We're slipping 42. We come over here where it peaks, we're slipping 231. And this is at constant throttle. We're just barely cruising out. I was probably doing about 30 miles an hour here. And down here we can watch our torque converter clutch line pressure. And as you can see, line pressure's pretty constant here. The desired slip is constant, obviously, because the pressure's constant. But our slip is going everywhere. This is when it was shuddering pretty bad. So right here we have 158 RPM when we want 20. Over here, I don't even know, it's gonna be hard. 305 slip RPM, wanted 20, and down here we still had 62 psi of line pressure. And if you scroll through, you can see that the line pressure on this torque converter, it never goes above about 70 psi or so. It's I don't even know if it hits 70. Let me see. 71 psi. So I think that's why my tune works so well, because I really cranked the pressure up to that converter. I'm telling it to send like 200 psi. If it's even capable of doing that. It all depends on how much pressure the pump's gonna output and a whole bunch of different factors, but the factory's not really sending much to it because they're wanting it to slip. They want it to slip 20 RPM for that ultra smooth ride, and so you don't feel any little bit of vibration in the engine. Well, I don't really care about that. I'm gonna call for full lockup like it was in the past on the older transmissions. Okay, now I'm gonna go ahead and command converter lock. As you can see, our white line, which is converter slip, is going all over the place. I'm gonna lock it right now. So we have now gone down to 0 RPM of slip. Now what I want to do is go ahead and load it up. And I'm not sure. You can see the line pressure went off the chart. I'll have to rescale the chart and see how much pressure that is supposedly sending that converter clutch. But slow down here some and give a little more throttle. I'd say it is tune eligible. So according to the scanner, we are running 594 psi torque converter clutch pressure. Obviously that's fake. It's just commanding it max, but there's no way, of course, that it can actually have that much pressure going to the torque converter. Okay, so I'm back at the shop, ready to tune this thing. Now you go ahead and type in VCM. This time you're going to click on VCM editor. Then up here, read vehicle, read. And now once this is all done, it's going to have all of our data pulled up. So as soon as it gets done loading, you can go ahead and disconnect it from the car, plug your laptop back in, and do the tuning outside the car, which is what you want to do because you're going to be here for a little while. You're going to go up to transmission, torque converter, click on that tab. It opens up this, and you have two tabs here. You got your general tab and your apply release. I have another video on YouTube showing what I had changed on another 6L80 to fix this same problem, but you know, it looked a little different here. Like it did not have an apply release. I think it just said like first through fourth gear or something. It's still the same concept as the other video, being that you want the apply to be at 318 miles an hour, because that's what the default setting was for anything that's not used. So let's say four-wheel drive low, we're never going to use converter lockup. So well, apparently they do. Let me go to okay, so 6th gear, four-wheel drive low. This is the OEM parameters. It wants to apply converter lock in 6th gear at 318 miles an hour. Obviously, it's never going to go that fast. That's just the parameter they use to basically disable converter lockup. And in your release, always wants to be 317. It needs to be a lower number for it to work right. So we're going to go through here, and the apply release, we're not going to touch 5th and 6th because we want the converter to still work in 5th and 6th to build less heat. Of course, we're going to be going full lockup, but in 1st through 4th, I want to completely disable converter lockup because the converter is on its last leg. We only want to use it when we need to. So 5th and 6th, which are going to be your overdrive gears. And so to do it, you just click apply here, and you're going to highlight this whole section here. Like I said, 318 miles per hour. Hit enter. Okay, that didn't work. There you go. Hit replace, which is the equal. And now it's going to be 318. And you're going to repeat this for all of the applies. For the releases, you're going to highlight and go 317. And I didn't even click on it. Sorry, I don't use HP tuners too often. So at 317, going to apply that. And then back down to the next. We're not going to hit 5th, like I said, or 6th. The D2 and D1, same thing. It's going to be, but watch out. This one's going to be, your apply is on the top half. So 318 miles per hour. With your release being on the bottom half, which is going to be the 317 miles per hour. Repeat for the rest of this. Okay, so we're done with the apply release tab. All the boxes in red are ones that I changed. The blues are the ones that I have not changed. So like this one I did not have to change because under apply it's already at 318 miles per hour. So that's all disabled. So like I said, all the reds had to click on and change, but all this was already set correct. This was correct, but all these had to be changed to 318 enable, 317 disable. So now that we're all done with this tab, what we have done is we have disabled torque converter clutch lockup in 1st through 4th gear, period. Now it's only going to lock in 5th and 6th. We're going to go to general, and our max pressure, they have it set at 953 kilopascals, which is equal to 138 psi. We're going to crank this up to 200 psi, which is equal to 1,378 kilopascal. Hit enter. Now we're done. Come down here to regulator gain. I was never able to find out what this meant. Like I said in the other video, I would just change this to 1 because that's what a lot of people on the internet recommended. And all I gotta say is what I've done here and what I did in the previous video, it worked very well. The car drove nicely. It was not violent going into lockup, but it also did not slip. It worked really well. You couldn't really tell any difference in the way it drove compared to what a factory transmission tune would drive like. Regulator offset, that's supposed to be the minimum pressure that the converter has on it during lockup. Now if you just take your mouse and you put it over any of these PIDs, or any of these tabs, it gives you a little description down here. So let's see what it says for regulator offset. Torque converter clutch pressure regulator offset. The offset, see, I'm not even sure what that means, but everybody said that that's a minimum pressure, and I cranked it up to 620 kilopascals last time. It worked good for me, so I'm gonna keep that the same. Now the apply ramp, this one's a little different than the other 6L80 I had, which was 320 down here. So on the top of the chart, the x-axis is going to be slip RPM error. Not slip RPM, but the error RPM. Y-axis is going to be engine RPM. One of the, somebody commented on my other video saying that all this in here is a pressure that it's going to go to at this slip RPM. I do not think they are right. It's in kilopascals, so 1 kilopascal is equal to like a quarter of a PSI. So if this is slip RPM error, and say we wanted 20 slip RPM, which is what during the test drive it showed that it wanted most of the time was 20 slip RPM, and it had 20 slip RPM, that would give us a slip RPM error of 0, where we're right on the money. So if that were the case, and we now have reached 0 error RPM, why would it drop the converter pressure to only a quarter PSI? That makes no sense. So I'm not sure exactly how this table works. Like I said, I'm not a genius at tuning or a transmission expert, but I do know that if we have a 400 RPM error and we're at high RPM, it's going to be calling for as much lockup as it can get pretty much. So on the other video, this was 320. I applied this to all of these tables, and that's what I'm going to do here. This one's 445, so we're gonna max this out at 445 and apply. This is going to be negative slip RPM, so like when you're coasting. And so in my previous video I wasn't really concerned about it, but I thought about it some more, and I'd rather have that converter locked up 100% when it's calling for lockup, even on coast. The less slip the better, because this thing's already got metal going throughout the transmission, so we want to keep this. We're going to apply, and we're going to completely max this out. I'm going to leave that at 1.0 because the way I see this is almost like a multiplication factor of some sort. I'm not sure, but I know this worked really well on the transmission that I had previously. So I'm just gonna do this here at 445 on all these tables. The desired pressure, we're going to max this out as well. Actually, we're going to go back to our max pressure here. We had it 1,378. I'm going to put our desired pressure at 1,378. We're going to give it all the pressure that we can give it. And like I said in my other video, it's not like you're going to blow the torque converter up. The pump on this thing probably maxes out at a couple hundred PSI, and it's going to be no different than if your converter clutch solenoid were to stick wide open. And if that happens, it's not going to blow up the converter. It's not going to mess anything up, blow any seals out. So there should be no reason you couldn't increase the max pressure to infinity. You shouldn't mess anything up. Then we're going to go over here to our torque converter clutch desired slip. We shouldn't have to worry about first, second, third, fourth, because we already disabled that in the apply release tab. but we are running converter in 5th and 6th. So we want to have 0 RPM of slip anytime we're calling for converter. So x-axis is RPM, y-axis is engine torque. So I don't care, everything's going to get 0 RPM. Zero RPM of slip for everybody. Same thing with the 6th gear. 0 RPM of slip in all situations that we're calling for lockup. Minimum slip AC on. Take that down to 0. Now we're going to disable DOD, which I think is very important, because if you are not running converter, or if you're locking the converter 100%, you're going to have less torque going up the hills and stuff, because it's no longer going to be able to unlock that converter to, say, a couple hundred RPM worth of slip to get you over the hill. And so we're going to want all 8 cylinders firing at all times, because if we were in 4-cylinder mode running full lockup up a hill, it's not going to like that at all. To disable DOD, you just go over here to engine, and let's see, I think it's in fuel, in lean fuel saving, DOD, disable. So that's all you got to do there. It's not going to throw any check engine lights, nothing like that. Go back to trans here, and so we're not going to worry about any of the DOD stuff, because we're not running DOD. That doesn't apply. Vehicle speed minimum, I'm going to set this 35, because there's no reason you should ever run lockup, in my opinion, under that vehicle speed. Before we install the tune, always make sure to have a battery charger hooked up on just the low setting. The higher you go on at least this battery charger, the more alternating current you have in your system. And I think the parameters are, you don't want like any more, absolutely no more than like 100 millivolts of AC. I could be wrong, but this charger here puts out about 70 millivolts of AC. They do have specific chargers meant for flashing vehicles. That's ideally what you would use. But so far I haven't had any problems with HP tuners using just a pretty basic battery charger on the low setting that produces very little AC voltage. We're going to come over here, and it's going to have right vehicle, and you're going to need credits to do this, so show license options. Connect interface, it is connected. It says I have 2 credits available. Oh, there we go. So here we go, we're going to click on the credits I have. Okay. Are you sure? Yes. And now we just got to write it. Another very important note, do not have your laptop plugged in to charge when you're doing this. If there's any voltage spike on the incoming line voltage to the laptop transformer, it's going to have a voltage spike going to the laptop, and has been known to completely brick ECMs and all sorts of modules in the vehicle if that were to happen. So you want a laptop with a good battery. Never be tuning. You can upload a tune file from the vehicle with the laptop probably without any problems, but if you're actually tuning it, you're writing the tune to the vehicle, make sure you're on battery power, and that's it. Okay, so now time for the final test drive. Perfect, it's calling for lockup right now. So we're in lockup. I'm watching the data, and we're at 0 RPM of slip. It's holding 0 RPM. We're going up a slight hill right now. Flat. Now we're hill. It's maintaining. Smooth, no shudder. Still at 0 RPM of slip. Now we're going back down a hill again. Okay, so let's look at our data now after the tune has been done. So as you can see, the white tracer, that's converter slip. When we call for lockup down here, which now we have 110 psi pressure going to the torque converter, which we had only about 70 max, remember? Now we're at 110, even though I set the pressure max at 200. After the computer did all of its calculations and stuff, it's only sitting in 110. But it's either on or off. There's no more ramping it, trying to get slip. It's like old school. It's either on or off, and that's the way I like it. So here we have converter slip. It immediately drops when the converter is called for, and it drops down to pretty much 0. So the white tracer here is where we're going to get our measurements, and we're at 0.3. I'm just dragging it right here. As you can see, as I drag my finger, slip RPM stays very close to 0, and it stays that way until the converter is no longer calling for lockup. So we can keep going. This is a very long test drive here, probably about 5 minutes long or so. And we finally unlocked the converter during coast, and then of course this is when we're at idle and such, so obviously we're going to have a lot of slip RPM right here. But it drove good. You can hardly tell a difference. I can't really tell much of a difference at all during acceleration. During decel, you barely feel a little bit of a downshift thing going on, but it is totally reasonable, and it is way better than paying several $1,000s for a new transmission. So be curious to see how much life the customer can get out of it now, because it actually only has 100,000 miles. So that's pretty bad that they only go that. Some of them only make it that far before torque converter failure.